fights the champion of light.
Hey there, Marvelous He-Man fans! When He-Man and the Masters of the Universe first aired on TV in 1983, it really took off and resonated with kids all over the world. It became one of the most popular shows from the 80s. However, despite its popularity, Filmation and Mattel also wanted to attract a young female audience, which they were not able to do that effectively with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, as it mostly attracted young male viewers. And due to that, they came up with She-Ra, Princess of Power. She-Ra was meant to complement He-Man, and I think it was pretty successful at that. He-Man has the Sword of Power, and She-Ra has the Sword of Protection, and there are a few essential differences between both of those weapons. In this video, we're going to talk about the Sword of Protection from She-Ra and its origins and features. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right in.
The honor of Grayskull!
The sword existed on paper before it ever hit a screen. Before its appearance in the 1985 film He-Man and She-Ra, The Secret of the Sword, and the animated TV series from the same year, She-Ra, Princess of Power, the Sword of Protection appeared in the 1984 Mattel mini-comic titled The Story of She-Ra. Copies of the mini-comic were found inside the packages of the She-Ra toy. In the mini-comic, we see the Sorceress of Grayskull having a nightmare about Hordak stealing a baby named Adora. A glowing sword appears and it guides her to a portal in Castle Grayskull. She sends He-Man to go through that portal in order to find Adora. On the planet of Etheria, Adora is fleeing from Catra. After reaching the Crystal Castle, with the help of the Sword of Protection, she transforms into She-Ra. He-Man also arrives there, and they both defeat Catra and drive her away. Their power swords, the Sword of Power and the Sword of Protection, recognize each other, and at that moment, the Sorceress of Grayskull reveals to them both that they are brother and sister. The moment Adora first holds it, the sword calls to her through someone else. Despite being different from the Mattel mini-comic in many ways, the animated TV series She-Ra, Princess of Power also starts with the Sorceress of Grayskull having a nightmare about Hordak stealing a baby named Adora. Just like the mini-comic, we also see a glowing sword guiding the sorceress through a door. The sorceress sends He-Man and his feline companion Cringer through that door. She tells them to find the owner of the sword that was guiding her. They go through the portal to the planet Etheria in another dimension. There, they're assisted by Bo and Cowl, members of the Great Rebellion against Hordak, as they fight against Hordak's evil army in the village of Thamor. Adam and Cringer are taken to Whispering Woods, a stronghold for rebels, by Bo and Cowl. There, they get introduced to the leader of the rebels, Princess Glimmer. Meanwhile, Shadow Weaver informs Hordak about someone who has come from another world. She also informs him about the fight that took place in the village of Thamor. Hordak sends Adora to make the rebels surrender. On several occasions, He-Man and Adora fight against each other. In one scene in Episode 1, Adam defeats Adora in a fight, and after that, he realizes, through the Sword of Protection as it starts glowing, that Adora was the one he was looking for. She's the one supposed to wield the Sword of Protection. And then one of the men from Hordak's evil army blasts him from behind with a beam and he falls unconscious. He-Man is taken to the Horde prison. In another scene from Episode 2, titled The Sword of She-Ra, Beast Island, Adora tells Adam that Hordak brought peace to the planet of Etheria. Adam tells her that she's wrong about Hordak and she should figure out on her own whether her beliefs about Hordak are true or not. Later on, Adora goes out on a journey across the planet of Etheria on her horse named Spirit, and she sees all the atrocities committed by Hordak. She goes to confront him. She tells him that he lied to her and kept her in the dark. Hordak whispers to Shadow Weaver and asks her whether her spell is working or not. Shadow Weaver replies by saying that the reason why her spell isn't working on Adora as effectively as it should might have something to do with the sword that she's now wielding. While the confrontation between them is ongoing, Shadow Weaver uses magic on Adora and makes her fall unconscious. In the third episode titled The Sword of She-Ra Part 3, She-Ra Unchained, the sorceress reaches out to Adora and reveals to her that Hordak kidnapped her when she was a baby, and He-Man is her brother. After knowing the truth, Adora turns into She-Ra and frees He-Man from captivity. One interesting thing to note here is that when Adora raises her sword, she says, "For the honor of Grayskull," unlike He-Man who says, "I have the power." Their transformation scenes are different from each other, as those differences reflect differences in their characters as well. Unlike He-Man, She-Ra does not simply represent raw strength. What it looks like, and why the design was intentional. The overall design of the Sword of Protection is very similar to the Sword of Power, although there are a few key differences between them. The Sword of Protection, wielded by She-Ra, is slimmer, lighter, and more elegant than the Sword of Power, and it also reflects the character of She-Ra and makes her distinct from the character He-Man. Just like She-Ra, her weapon is also precise and adaptable. The Sword of Protection also has a jewel embedded in its hilt, and it's not just for decoration. In the classic Filmation continuity, without that jewel functioning properly, Adora cannot turn herself into She-Ra. Filmation and Mattel wanted the sword to match the personality of She-Ra, as they genuinely wanted to resonate with young female audiences. The jewel is the real power, and what happens when it breaks. In the beginning of the 21st episode of the first season of She-Ra, Princess of Power, titled The Stone and the Sword, we see Hordak presenting the Doom Balloon to Grizzlor. The Doom Balloon only works by absorbing energy from lightning. Shadow Weaver tells Hordak that a powerful storm is about to hit, and that would be a perfect opportunity to use the Doom Balloon against the rebels. Hordak uses the Doom Balloon in order to attack the Whispering Woods, the stronghold of the rebels. The Doom Balloon is quite successful at weakening the rebel forces through its attacks. When She-Ra goes to face the Doom Balloon, she's able to deflect its rays and overload its circuits, but in the process, the stone embedded in her sword breaks, and she turns into Adora again. She tries to turn back into She-Ra, but to no avail. Adora decides to go to Light Hope, the mystical guardian who resides within the Crystal Castle that is situated at the top of Skydancer Mountain. Cowell tells her that she needs the help of Swift Wind in order to get there, and without the Sword of Protection, that won't be possible. Adora tells him that she's willing to climb to the top of Skydancer Mountain herself. After a grueling journey with several setbacks, she does manage to reach the Crystal Castle and meet Light Hope, who in turn tells her that she must go to the First Ones. The First Ones are presented as the living spirits of the founders of Etheria in this classic continuity, and only they can restore her powers. She goes on a quest and completes a series of challenges in order to reach the First Ones. She's finally able to meet them, and they tell her to use the Sword of Protection again. The stone is repaired and she gets her powers back. As we can see in the episode, the stone embedded in the Sword of Protection is central to the sword's power in the classic continuity, and if it gets damaged, then Adora won't be able to turn herself into She-Ra. It's also a shapeshifter. The sword can become almost anything. The Sword of Protection, unlike the Sword of Power, also has the ability to turn into various objects. For example, in the 14th episode of the first season, titled Friendship, She-Ra turns her sword into a lasso in order to free Loni's father. In the 28th episode, titled Beau's Farewell, Hordak wants to use an eclipse beam to destroy Castle Brightmoon, which is the headquarters of the Great Rebellion against him. At the end of that episode, She-Ra turns her sword into a chain and uses it to pull the moon out of the eclipse's beam range. In another episode, titled He Ain't Heavy, She-Ra is able to turn her sword into a rope. The 2018 reboot blows the origin wide open. The sword isn't just magic, it's also tech. The Netflix and DreamWorks reboot series from 2018, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, significantly changes the origin story of the Sword of Protection as well as She-Ra. Unlike the original 1985 animated TV series, the First Ones in the Netflix reboot series are not the living spirits of the founders of the planet of Etheria. Instead, they're an ancient advanced civilization connected to Eternia, whose technology shaped much of Etheria's hidden history. They created the Sword of Protection for Mara, who was She-Ra 1,000 years before Adora. The sword created by them isn't just powered by simple magic, unlike the Sword of Protection shown in the original animated TV series from 1985. It's a unique combination of First One's technology, Etherian magic, and magic craft from the planet of Krytus. It has a golden hilt with a runestone contained within it. Adora finds the Sword of Protection when she's wandering into the Whispering Woods. Also, the story of how Adora came to Etheria is significantly different from the original animated TV series in this Netflix reboot. Here, Hordak isn't the one who kidnaps the baby Adora from Eternia and takes her to planet Etheria. In fact, Light Hope is the one who brings her to Etheria through a portal. Hordak finds Adora at the portal and brings her to the Fright Zone, and recruits her into his army. The Netflix reboot series completely reinvents everything from scratch. The sword was always a trap. The Heart of Etheria reveal. The 4th season of the Netflix reboot series completely subverts the myth of the Sword of Protection. The Sword of Protection was not only meant for heroic purposes, it was created to help activate the Heart of Etheria through She-Ra. The Heart of Etheria was created by the First Ones as an extremely powerful weapon against their enemies. If activated, it can cause massive destruction on an extremely large scale, as it has the capacity to destroy an entire world. However, without She-Ra, it cannot be activated. As it turns out, the Sword of Protection was meant to control her. The First Ones even reprogrammed Light Hope to activate the Heart of Etheria at any cost. In the final episode of the 4th season, titled Destiny Part 2, Adora pleads with Light Hope to not activate the Heart of Etheria. Light Hope doesn't listen to her and activates it anyway using the Sword of Protection, compelling Adora to lift her sword. We see Adora struggling against it helplessly. Eventually, Light Hope goes against her own programming and allows Adora to act. Adora shatters the sword, causing an explosion that destroys Light Hope's systems and seals the Heart of Etheria. The sword was never exactly meant to be a force of greater good in the way Adora originally believed. It had a war agenda attached to it, and Adora was the one used as a pawn by the First Ones. The Netflix reboot series gives a very dark origin story to Adora and the Sword of Protection, as compared to the original animated TV series from 1985. The moment Adora breaks the sword and why it's the biggest scene in the show. The Netflix reboot series from 2018 portrays the heroism of Adora in a way that is more complicated and tragic than the one shown in the original animated TV show from 1985. In the 1985 animated show, Adora was simply destined to be She-Ra. She was destined to use her powers for the greater good, and it was as simple as that. The original animated TV show is morally neat. On the other hand, in the Netflix reboot series, the Sword of Protection wasn't exactly a purely noble or heroic weapon. It was meant to help activate the Heart of Etheria created by the first ones, and the woman wielding the sword was not simply meant to realize her destiny as the heroic She-Ra. Or at least, it wasn't that simple. In fact, she was meant to be controlled by the first ones, who wanted to use her for their own war agenda. In the Netflix reboot series, Adora becomes a hero by rejecting that version of her destiny as She-Ra. She destroys the Sword of Protection because her conscience compels her to do so. She knows how much damage her sword can cause, especially if the Heart of Etheria gets activated through it. By rejecting the role the first ones assigned to She-Ra, she also rejects the destructive Heart of Etheria project. The 5th season of the show opens with Adora without her powers. The sword comes back, but this time it comes from inside her. In the 5th season, the Sword of Protection comes back in a new way, but this time it comes when Adora is herself able to turn into She-Ra without the help of the original sword. In the 5th episode of the 5th season, titled Save the Cat, we see Adora turning into She-Ra without the help of the original sword in order to save her friend Catra, who has been badly injured and controlled by Horde Prime. As part of her new She-Ra form, her sword just materializes. Now the first ones are not the ones controlling her through the Sword of Protection anymore. She doesn't need the original sword to become She-Ra. She has it within herself to become She-Ra. The strength was always within her. Also, when she obtains a new She-Ra form in the episode Save the Cat, her materialized sword is more stylized, shining more than ever before. And now she doesn't have to carry the old Sword of Protection with her everywhere. She can turn into She-Ra at will and make the sword appear. Filmation and Mattel created She-Ra to appeal to a young female audience. She-Ra perfectly complements He-Man, but at the same time, she is as heroic and noble as He-Man, although in a different way. Her flexible and adaptable sword accurately reflects and reveals the interesting elements of her character, and the origin story of the Sword of Protection is as interesting as the origin of She-Ra herself. And on that note, it's time to sign off. We hope you enjoyed our video. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being with us, we really appreciate it. Stay tuned till next time, and we'll be back with another new video.